remember what the other one was. I think like solution discovery or something like that, something along those lines.
Right.
So it was very much about getting out of the building, going and speaking to customers, looking at it not from, hey, I want to build a product viewpoint. It was very much about problem discovery, really. So actually going out and seeing, what sort of problems people were actually experiencing. So that with struggle to breastfeed, like most parents tend to, and doing the whole bottle feeding process. And I don't know if anyone's a parent on here watching, they're probably nodding their heads behind the screen going, yes, a plethora of stuff, right? So when I was traveling, I used to have to pack, 5 or 6 bottles if I was driving somewhere, just in case, because a baby feeds like every couple of hours and sometimes they're fussy. So you give them a spare bottle. And my problem, I tended to run out of bottles. Okay. Being a project manager, you'd think I was very, very organized, but for some reason, when it came to my daughter, I was a little unorganized.
Yeah. And so for non-parents, I'm not a parent, so so okay, you have this young newborn, right?
Yes.
Newborn, they obviously drink milk. They don't eat solids.
Nope.
And how long do they drink milk for?
They drink milk up until, it can be up until a year. So you actually start them on solids or soft foods from about 4 to 6 months onwards.
Okay.
And in the time of you doing that, there's very strict things you need to do. You need to sterilize the bottles, the teats, dummies, the water that you actually add into the bottles. So if you're formula feeding, you actually have to sterilize the water as well. So you have to go and pre-boil that water, let it cool off so you can actually, it's like a full-on process.
Is it because like obviously bacteria and or just something's not clean? Is that the reason?
It's more to do about the fact that when they're a newborn, they've got no immune system whatsoever, right? So you definitely don't want your average germ getting into their belly because it makes them really sick. So the idea is that you sterilize as much as possible to create it as safe as possible. So until the time when they stop, crawling around, they've got their hands in their mouth, that kind of thing, you can kind of, ease a little bit, but people are still taught to keep sterilizing those bottles and keep sterilizing that water as well. Yeah. So it's definitely a process that you do up until, I think I did it up until my daughter was a year old.
Okay, wow. So the first year is pretty hectic.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So if you want to go outside, obviously it becomes a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about planning. You have to plan everything. It's not like you used to be able to, like yourself, Hans, right now. By the sounds of it, you can just grab your keys, grab your mobile, and walk out the door. I wish it was that easy. You kind of got to go through the process and go, okay, I have to sterilize those bottles. I have to sterilize that water, make sure it's cooled down enough, pre-fill all of those bottles. I have to pack enough formula to fill those bottles by the time we go out. Then it's the nappies and the spare clothing and the wipes and all the other stuff you need. So it could be an hour-long process before you actually leave the house because of all the packing and organization you have to do.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we got to this point. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So different from your own personal experience, your personal pain point, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I know. I was, like I said, I'd run out of bottles while I was out. So, I think I was going down to the shops for a couple of hours. And the next thing, my daughter would suddenly want another bottle or wanted to be soothed. So I give her a bottle, which is what you do sometimes. And then the next thing, I've run out and I'm now half an hour from home and I've got a screaming baby in the car who's hungry. So my initial idea was actually to solve how can I not run out of a bottle while I'm traveling? And I actually came up with a concept that was sort of around a bottle that you could pick up anywhere. So it would be at a service station, at a Coles, at a Woolworths. Think of it like, I don't know, just like picking up a V drink or something, when you're going to a service station, it's like they're inaccessible, but it would be like a...
prototyping, or how did you do some feasibility?
Yeah, sure. So the next thing was actually then sitting down with that information and distilling it down to what the key issue was. And it was that if I could develop a product that meant a parent had one thing to deal with and they could carry that empty, and it did everything that it needed to do. So it could sterilize that bottle and the water and everything at the same time. Was that even possible? So I went and researched. So I went and researched the technology. So I went in aerospace, within medical fields, within consumer products, and just searched anything related to sterilization, and whether that was chemical, right, even ozone, that kind of stuff. And that's when I came across UVC light being used in the medical field and the dental field to actually sterilize surgical equipment. Mm-hmm. And then also within consumer products, so within water treatment plants to sterilize water, and within consumer products to sterilize drink water, so like drink bottles. And from that point, it came down to then going, this is it, and how do I start concept design from that point? And that's kind of when we started getting to, kind of testing these crazy ideas. I actually went out then with that concept before even building anything. I didn't even go and prototype. I just kind of got a glass bottle and a kind of concept of what it might look like. And I actually went and tested that with parents, like just with this, doesn't even function. I actually just put together this basic design test and said, look, if you're prepping it in a certain way for the baby, and just watch them prepare the bottles. So the initial idea was to actually have the sterilization unit in the base, so actually shining upwards. So you'd have two open cavities basically for the bottle. And strangely enough, we actually discovered it was very confusing for parents actually having that. So I'm glad we didn't actually go down full into a design route into doing that before actually testing it again. So,
so
we
this
learned a
is
lot.
more user research in terms of kind of look-alike, right? It's not functional, but it's kind of look-alike. You're trying to see how people might use your potential product.
Yeah, and also making sure we weren't adding in features that were confusing for a parent and making it worse, making their lives more difficult. And it was good that we did it so early, because we were sort of, to start off with, hell-bent on having this bottle that had the sterilization in the bottom of the bottle, and we could have wasted a lot of funds and a lot of time developing that further if we hadn't tested really early.
Yeah. So we're kind of 20 minutes in. This is interesting because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you have actually a working product ready to launch. Is that correct?
We have a working product, but what we're doing is we're actually redoing the design right now, because we've tested that in the lab within the studio. And what we found is that the current design we have isn't as effective as we want it to be. So we're going through now another design and prototyping stage. And then it will get to the point where we're actually then manufacturing tooling and doing the rest of that. So, yeah.
Okay. And could you show us a little bit more about, perhaps this is Chantel. I think you have something on the desk. It looks like a closer to the next situation.
Yeah, that's it. So we kind of went through, when we're looking at that whole like UVC light thing. I don't know if anyone's seen something like this. This is actually like a SteriPen. So you actually travel with this and it sterilizes water. So if you're out hiking somewhere or in third world applications, you can actually take a drink bottle like this and then pop it into it. And this actually sterilizes. So this lamp is actually a mercury lamp though. So this technology was actually too big, obviously, to fit into a baby bottle. And recently what we found over the last 4 years is that tech's become so small that you now have what we see here, which is basically UV lamps or LEDs, so LEDs. So now you've got this tiny little thing. It's like a microchip that sits tiny, it basically could sit at the tip of your fingernail. And that now we've taken that technology and integrated it into the actual lid of a bottle. So this is just a 3D prototype that we did for our concept. And basically the light actually sits in the actual cap end. It'll sit over the teeth and then shine on top of the bottle and through and into the water. Press the button, and it's the same concept as this. Basically that light's just shining through to the teat area, into the bottle, and sterilizing the water and the teat at the same time. So that's kind of how we came from the initial design to where we are now with it. Yeah. Does that make sense?
How long did it take? How many seconds did it take?
The sterilization for this, we set it at 5 minutes. And that basically means, but the whole process for you to wash the bottle, rinse it, fill it with tap water, and then press the button is 30 seconds, and then you walk away. You go and do something else, or you throw it in your bag and you're already about your day doing your thing. Whereas how parents are doing it at the moment is it's half an hour. Like you're pulling apart 6 bottles, washing them all, rinsing them all, putting them together. Then you're putting them into a sterilizer, pulling them out again. Then you're putting water into them, packing them, putting them together and putting them back. So it's a huge time difference. It's like a massive time difference.
Yeah. And in terms of effectiveness, how would you test?
So this is the point of doing this is we actually put it into certified lab testing, and they put it through what's called a log reduction test. A log reduction basically tests how many particles of bacteria or viruses are left within that water post a treatment. So currently for sterilization for baby bottle products, it's to a level of 99.9%, which is the log reduction of 3. And that's the state that we're aiming at for our product as well. So it's 99.9% of germs and bacteria being killed at the end of that sterilization cycle.
Fascinating. And so basically they give you some dirty water, just for testing purposes.
Sure.
And then you put it in there, right? Am I imagining this right?
Well, what we say is it's got to be drinkable water. So something that you would generally drink out of a tap. So if you walked up to a tap and it was drinkable water, that's the water you're going to use. It won't remove anything like iron, magnesium, minerals, anything like that from the water.
Yeah, it's not
any normal
No,
that's it. And any sterilization method that currently exists doesn't do that anyway. So it's the same thing. If you take water from your tap, shove it in your kettle, boil it, it's the same water by the time you do this sterilization process. If you want it to be pre-filtered, you'd have to add some sort of pre-filtration service to it. But that's why we say to people, it's got to be drinkable tap water. The thing is, you could basically put this on a plane, right? And you could use the bathroom tap water in the bottle. It sounds so gross, but you could drink the bathroom tap water, you could put it in the bottle and use the bathroom tap water. The only thing is that we say to people is you have to rinse it properly in between each cycle, like once you've actually had a feed, because it's got to be clear water, because if you've got murky water, obviously it reduces the effectiveness of that light. So yeah, that's basically the only stipulation. Yeah,
and I'm imagining there's a rechargeable battery.
Yeah, we're using USB-C. Yeah, thanks. I got stuck. So it's basically rechargeable. So like anything else you could find in your house with a USB recharger, either like one of the ones you have for your phone or in the car, or it's pretty easy. And it lasts about 6 charges. So you could do 6 feeds while you're out, which is about 12 hours of travel. Yeah.
Great. So I think parents with young children would love this.
Yeah, it's generally what we hear. And it's usually next to the comment of the fact of, why hasn't this been done already? Like, why are we still doing it the old way? Like,
I think
what we hear.
I think maybe new parents don't know, and then once they figure out how to do it, their kids probably have grown up.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I think it'll be the way of the future. Like, we've got vacuums that vacuum our floor for us. It seems like the next evolution in parenting things is not having to manually sterilize the stuff and carry all these things with us.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think we're running up to about 30 minutes mark. So Shannon, for our listening audience who want to learn more about your project, who want to support it or back it or even to buy it, how do they find out more information?
Yeah, sure. So we're actually running an equity crowdfunding campaign at the moment to raise the funds to get us to the manufacturing stage. And we're actually doing that through Virtual. So I think most people have probably heard of the Virtual platform. You can go to Virtual and just search Pronto Bottle, or it's like virtual.com/company/Pronto Bottle. So if you want to get behind it and you love the project, go for it. We'd love to have you on board as well. So yeah.
Okay. And so this is equity crowdfunding. So they basically get shares, right? They don't get it.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. I think that's the best part is you actually get a portion of shares in our company. So, you quite literally are coming along for the journey with us, and you get to see, us now over the next 3, 5, 7, 10 years with this product, which is amazing. So I love that fact that people who are as passionate and are possibly parents themselves and have experienced the problem actually get involved in the company too, which is.
Do you think you can go into production, and are you going to do a crowdfunding, like not the equity crowdfunding, but pre-sale crowdfunding?
We actually did pre-sale crowdfunding last year, but we learned very quickly that when parents go to purchase a bottle, it's a very quick decision to purchase ratio. So you go, oh heck, I need a bottle feed. I need it now, not in 9 months when you're going to ship out the product.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah, because baby's crying, right? Like baby's crying. They need a bottle right now. Gotcha.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yes.
So it's great for any other hardware product, but we're just in a really unique situation with this type of thing. So that's why we went down the virtual route as well.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. I think crowdfunding, it's like for certain gadgets that you can wait and you don't really mind. Well, sometimes you know that you may or may not get it because there's many risks, right? So
yeah, totally. Yeah, you got to remember that, like with that sort of crowdfunding, it's not like you're on a shopping channel. There's so many risks because people are startups as well at that stage too, right? So
there are some famous flops, right? Despite raising millions of dollars.
Yeah, very much so.
Definitely not easy. Hardware is hard. Okay, well,
yes.
Thank you, Shannon, for coming on our show. Please stick around because Bernardo, I think we're gonna get some Q&A at the end. Is that right?
Awesome, fantastic. I look forward to it.
Are you seeing any questions from the audience?
You're on mute, Bernardo. You're welcome. Sorry. Cool.
Yeah, I think Shannon, we'll come back for the Q&A at the end. So Scott, I'll ask you to unmute, and then we'll hand it over to Bernardo.
Howdy. Thank you for that conversation. Actually, just whilst we're switching cameras around, that was really interesting and really fascinating to. I find it always really fascinating to listen to the ideas that people sort of create just from the problem through the journeys of exploring, the nuances. And I have a deep amount of respect as well for the hardware game, because I understand how hard it is and how many iterations you have to go through. One of my good group of friends is a group called Anti-Ordinary, and they're up in Brisbane, and they do the flexible snow helmets. And just to hear them go through how many cycles of change and retooling and all that sort of stuff, and I really feel for them, and it gave me a much deeper appreciation, because having worked alongside them, I do hear sometimes people say, especially in the startup space, oh, why don't you just do this? And it's just like, you don't understand. You really don't understand. It takes this amount of time in order to get the next version. It was so interesting for me, because in the startup world, we often talk about quick pivots, but in the hardware world, you can't really do a quick pivot. There has to be a very well-meaning and thought out design. So they're really fascinating. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, totally. Thanks. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Scott Coe. I wear a few different hats, but I think the primary hat that I wear right now is as the founder and director of Color Space Gallery. We're an arts social enterprise, and what we do is we help organizations, businesses, any sort of shared spaces create an office environment or shared environment that is both beautiful, that feels engaging, but is also good for people who work or who visit, improves well-being and mental health. And we do this by bringing art into the space and then changing it around on a regular basis. So the concept is to kind of jam a few things together, art as a service, right? And so much like how a business might get fresh flowers changed around, we should go in and change the artwork. The flip side of this is that we don't own any artwork. So we're a platform in that regards. We source everything from local communities of emerging artists. And so what we have essentially done is we wanted to transform all these spaces around, say, a city into galleries. And in doing so, create just many more opportunities for local artists to be able to get their artworks out. Because, you know, I understand how for artists it can be difficult to meaningfully find opportunities to have their art on display, more so than just on a phone, you know, because there's only so far you can go in terms of that digital component. So whilst we just talk about hardware and not getting the hardware, there is something important, I think, about hardware, about the tangibleness of things that is really important. It could both help business look amazing, help people who work there feel great, and at the same time create opportunities for local arts, for local culture and local communities at the same time. And so all of that is wrapped up under essentially a rental type model, a subscription type model. So we would also direct some of the rental and subscription to the artists as form of payments, and their artworks displayed for sale too. So fundamentally, let's pay artists to put their works on display for sale. So that's kind of the broader vision behind it. But then more broadly beyond that, I do have a background in consulting in the social impact space as well. So things that, and I think this is where I originally connected with Hans too, was this conversations around how do we work together as community, how do we create things that have impact beyond ourselves as individuals and as businesses. And so those are probably the main hats that I wear. Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to think about this is much like how a lot of say offices or businesses might say, look, we're in a space, we've got say 30 people in this space, and we've got say a boardroom, reception area, and we can host say something like 5 or 6 different pieces or something like that. So normally in the interior decoration world, you might go in and say, well, your logo is red, your carpets are red, let's put something that's red in here. But what we're sort of trying to say is actually when we think about the impact that something like art can have on a space, it can add significantly more to it. So what if we help a business say, what kind of space do you want to create? Is it a dynamic space? Based on that, we then curate artwork so we have a platform and artists can upload all their works on our platform. We then say, okay, well, we know that there's a space here. Let's say it's FAB9, right? We know there's a space that can host this amount of artwork. That means this is essentially a gallery that can host a ongoing display of say 6, 10, 12 artworks. So once we understand that and we can match the groups of artists to a client, then our service, so to speak, kicks in, right? So we would then, of course, so the business would, the clients would say, pay for a subscription fee for us. We would then direct that to the artists who are on display. And yes, as you pointed out, their artwork is displayed for sale, and they have plaques next to them as well. So that have, QR codes and, if people want to read more about who the artist is. And it's really fundamentally about the engagement as well. So that's what I guess businesses are in some ways paying us for. It's kind of like having a refit of an office every 3 months. And it's not just offices as well. So we've done a lot of work with government. We're currently doing work with 2 hospitals in New South Wales as well. So we've been able to transform some of their shared environments, like quite sterile environments, into these galleries. And what's really interesting in terms of the dynamic of all of this is that because these are businesses and organizations that have put their trust in us to do the curation work, they're no longer responsible, or they're not on the hook to sort of say, oh, well, why did you choose this artwork? Because I hate this artwork, and like this, we're the ones that can wear that. But there's an interesting dynamic where we can bring works in that other people may not have approved because we're the ones responsible for it. So there's a de-risking aspect. And with that comes the benefit of cultural change that happens too. So so I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent there, but that's kind of the service and the value that we bring to our clients. And again, in doing so, it's meant that we've been able to represent artists who otherwise wouldn't have had an opportunity for their art to be put on display. Because if you leave it up to a business to decide, they often may go for, again, logo red, carpet red, let's get red artwork. Because we come in and change it, we can bring all sorts of artworks in, because we say to our clients, you don't have to love it. That's not our job. We're not here to give you that everybody loves, but it'll change. And so then we start to see this greater engagement that comes through. Yes, the short answer is yes. There's several studies that demonstrate, for example, that being in a more, call it, an enriched environment both increases productivity by about 15%, reduces stress by about 17%. The World Health Organization last year released this wide-ranging study across something like 3,000 studies that all sort of point towards the benefits of art on health. But I guess where I want to almost slightly redirect that a little bit is kind of teeing off something like this event that you guys have created, which is around the community, right? And around our relationship with these types of things. Because I think it's where the biggest value that we come in this sort of relationship is in some of the softer connections between people, right? So let me give you an example. One of our clients, who is a private client, a tech firm, when we started to bring artwork in, at first there was an intention of, we believe the color orange inspires creativity and innovation, so can we have works that are more colorful? And we did that for a little bit. Usually our process is the first couple of rotations, we give people exactly what they want. And then we started to kind of introduce works that were a little bit darker, and not thematically, just darker, right? And then we introduced works that were more photos. And then there was stuff that was more textural. We even got to the point where we had like a hanging sculpture made out of all these found materials. But the really cool thing wasn't something that was really directly measurable. Like a couple of colleagues who I know who work for this client started to send me photos of how their staff would rock up to work dressed like the artwork. Right? And that became a quarterly thing. And they will share that amongst the community. So this is a broader cultural change that we've had for this particular client. And this is stuff that's a little bit harder to measure, Having conversations with everybody every time we come in to change the artwork, we could see the cultural change that had occurred, where people recognize that the environment that they were in was not necessarily just again, you're here because you're here to work and we know you're stressed, so we're going to put a blue piece of artwork in to reduce your stress. It wasn't that. It was that, hey, we could have a disagreement about the art on display. Why not? Did you see the last one? I don't like the last one. Oh, I love the last one. How can you not like the last one? Like all of that broader human sort of connection that occurs, that's the impact that we try to create. You know, I think when we look, take a little step back at the broader art world, there's often a perception of, you know, that it's fine art. I saw a stat recently, like something like 36% of Australians feel like the arts are not for me. And that's up by 10% from a few years ago. And that says something about, quote unquote, the art world. But we know art has a huge impact on our lives and on our culture. And yet it's becoming harder and harder for people to understand their relationship to it. And that's kind of what we're trying to fundamentally do, is to help people rethink of what their relationship is to something that has been part of our culture and society for thousands of years. So that's the kind of connection and impact. So yes, there are all those benefits like mental health, stress, production, but I guess I really wanted to highlight the more human component of it as well. And I think in particular, talking about things like creativity and community, which again, I know is one of the premises of this kind of a conversation. I always like to bring back to this idea that we're in a society now in which there is ever more digital presence, right? Everything's about technology. There's so much about AI. Everything is about what we can do online and everything like that. But there's always a question, which is, or not a question, but like there's also this underlying trend where we sort of say the future of business is you know, of our sort of communities is about being creative, right? And I always find it interesting that like technology in some ways can inhibit us from creativity, right? Sure, there's some amazing technology that allows us to be creative, but sometimes when we look at the businesses that get so much growth, it is all about like scale and numbers and data and all that kind of stuff, but it forgets the entire other side of the spectrum, which is around going slower, you know, which is around wasting time sometimes, you know, creating things that don't work, having fun with it. And I think what you just described is a really good example of that. Like, yes, we're using technology to facilitate those things, but I think there should be a celebration of stuff that isn't always 100% purely productive. So those are the things from which I believe creativity is really born. And it's not that everybody is a genius creator at heart. It is that lateral diffuse thinking. It is being able to go, I wonder what happens if we do this thing over here. I wonder if there's an experience that I can create over there. And so, and even for me and how I got Colorspace started, because like I said, I used to be in a corporate world. I used to sit in an office and I would watch this one guy come in and change the fake flowers in the corner every month. And we'd pay him $50 and the artwork never changed. And I was like, what if I could change the artwork? Right. So that's sort of the origin spark for Colorspace, if you will. And of course, yes, I spoke to artists and I knew that there was a broader issue there. But that's the slower type of creativity that I think is really important and that we should champion and try to really advocate for that too. Absolutely. I think the future of spaces is actually brighter than what we might be seeing. And my reasoning for that is to cite both the conversation I had as well as prior examples, right? So I know at the moment there's a lot of doom and gloom, and people might listen to what kind of space is doing and go, oh, we're in trouble because, yeah, a lot of offices are closed. We're not going to shy away from that. And when we talk about the future, we sort of say, oh, people aren't necessarily going back to the workplace, right? But I also think that when we like at first, everyone was like, oh, we can work from home, brilliant. And now, 6 months down, people are like, we can't keep doing this. Get us out of home, right? So I think there is a role for people to be together. And I think Heinz mentioned at the outset of this that even amongst the FAB team, there is still weekly human face-to-face catch-up because you need that sort of connection. And so where I believe the trend to go into is that it might be smaller spaces, and I'm pretty sure this is what the survey data is showing as well. People want to go to that hybrid space, but why do you come into a space, right? You don't come into a space in order to just work in a cubicle. It's to have environments where you can spark ideas and have that sort of energy, which means there has to be a really good reason for people to go into a space, which means that the type of space should actually be more dynamic and not less dynamic, right? So I think that it will be a case where there'll be more smaller spaces, but because it's smaller footprint, there's a bit more budget to be able to invest in enriching the space, okay? So that's the sort of call it the theoretical approach to it. And in my conversations with the major architectural firms and the groups that's borne out as well. But I will also cite a living example of this, which is so Basecamp, Trello, all these big tech firms, they've already been doing this. I mean, Basecamp, I believe, had already moved towards this hybrid model something like midway through 2019. And what they found was that their type of office was one that tried to simulate a bit of a home environment, but they also over-serviced it, right? In the sense of anyone that comes in on any day of the week will be able to get a well-cooked, catered lunch. They used to only do that on Tuesdays, and then they realized that so many people were missing out. And so they started to make it enticing for people to be able to come in. They didn't force people to be there, but they made it enticing for people to come in. So I think the future will actually be more dynamic. And even the CFOs now are thinking, oh, it's not about trying to get as many people into a space and increase the cost per bum on seat, but it is about saying, oh, what can we do to create a more healthy, holistic type of environment? So, I mean, I'm slightly vested in saying something like that because I'd love for everyone to be able to do that. But I do also believe that that is the case. I mean, I think my research is bearing that out now as well. So,
yeah. I can I just jump in, Bernardo?
Yeah.
So, yeah, my theory, again, my hypothesis here is that more spaces will mimic or be more like the kind of the design sprint space that's, loose furniture, whiteboard, a little bit unfinished. Is not going to mimic the boardroom, right? Nobody wants to go to that kind of environment because I think the future of work very much depends on creativity and problem solving and a bit more collaborative work, working with people inside and outside of the company, right? It's going to be more kind of horizontal. So social physics, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I think it's perhaps useful to talk about the broader, I call it the art environment, right? Where art has always been, you know, a lot of it is driven from a private patronage perspective, right? So which is people buying art, right? And I should also probably put a cap around a lot of this conversation is about visual art as opposed to say performance art, which is a slightly different kettle of fish at the moment. But from a visual arts perspective, the way for artists to be able to get their art out, especially in Australia, has often been through, you know, like online platforms, right? And also through funding. But funding for the arts has decreased by something like 80% in the past 10 years. And funding to the arts is constantly being cut and constantly being cut. I don't know to what extent, like that's not a great thing, but I also don't know to what extent that's entirely a bad thing as well. And I'm sorry to any artists who might hear that and think this of me. But the reason I say that is because I think that it really asks for a relationship, a thought process around our relationship with art. And so I kind of link it all the way back to the conversation that I had right at the start, which is this idea of, you know, why do so many people feel like art is inaccessible to them? Right, and I think it's because the art hasn't been made accessible to people. So what we're trying to do is to expand that accessibility. And so what's in it for the artist from our perspective is that we want to find new ways for people to be able to engage with art. You know, this isn't about replicating the models of the past where it's about, well, you sell a piece of artwork here and then we'll resell it at a high price point and we'll make it very exclusive and then we'll sell it for $50,000 or $100,000. You know, it always pains me to bring up the point that like Rothko, for example, who's a modern abstract artist whose works sell for millions and millions of dollars, died completely penniless, right? And so what does that say about our relationship with the artist and the art itself? You know, what was the value in that? And so what I'd love to be able to do is to help artists find new ways into getting their art out. And for me, this is where I bring a little bit of the business mindset into it, which is, well, in order for art, who are the suppliers in this case, to be able to get their art out, we need to find new consumers and new market ways for people to engage with that art. And that means if we can then move art out from being either on a gallery or on a phone and into other places where people exist and live and work, then that means we can actually find new channels out for artists. And like I said, we've been able to help artists whose works might have been a little bit left of center in terms of, you know, maybe their works is just a little bit challenging, a little bit provocative, but we've been able to get that and put it into a work environment that otherwise never would have said yes to it. And that means we're building new connections for people everywhere. And so that's what's in it for the artist from our perspective. And, you know, I'm going to, again, be pretty transparent and say, like, at our current sort of size and scale, it's not like we're going to be able to fully support the lifestyles of artists in what we do. However, if we can find new ways for them to get their works out in a really meaningful, tangible manner, that's what's in it for artists. It means that they don't have to learn all about how to hustle on Instagram, right? It means that they don't have to pay a gallery to put their artwork out and then learn all about what it means to run a Facebook campaign, you know. And also because we have a very specific thing, which is that we don't commission any art for us. It's all about saying, artists, if you've got works you've created and it's now just in a spare room somewhere, let's get that and put that out on display. So we're essentially turning their art into a source of passive income that could also translate into a sale. So there's a little bit of a, not quite circular economy, but there's a little bit of a supply and minimization of resource component in this. There's a bit of a sharing thought process to it as well. I saw a question from Hans, which is, what's my take on Patreon?
Yes.
So my quick response to that is, I think it's a wonderful idea, to be honest with you. I don't have any comments on the business model behind it. I understand there's a few different versions of Patreon now, But I think that it's a good idea, you know. I think it's a good idea in terms of if people really appreciate an artist and one style of art and they want to support that artist directly, then that's brilliant. And I think some of the online media, some of social media has really helped support some of that, which I think is, again, fantastic. But like I said, that requires a level of digital technological know-how as well. And I think you're going to find this sort of situation with a lot of these types of platforms that the earlier you are on a platform, the more successful you'll likely be, you know. So an artist that's got 1 million followers on Instagram is just going to be more successful than an artist starting today with no followers on Instagram.
Yeah. So Scott, I think started out with some YouTubers. You know, they're kind of not happy with the way YouTube changed algorithms and obviously impacts the income, right? Because it's a advertising supported business model. So they created this alternative way for the creator to be paid directly by the fans, right? So cutting out kind of the big tech.
Yes. But I find it interesting that now Patreon, I think, is also being disrupted by the next Patreon.
Yeah.
So there's another one that has a slightly lesser commission rate too.
Yeah.
So it's always going to be that, and that you're always going to have call it a market approach to something like that. When it's direct, it's always going to be a bit of a market approach to it, where again you'll have a few artists that will attract that attention, and then a lot of other artists trying to also vie for the attention. And so for us, my vision, like if I could create this, would be if we can turn the entire city of Melbourne into a gallery, like every space becomes a gallery, then there's an ongoing demand, right? For there's a broader democratization of the system for art. And that means that there's more opportunities for works that, again, may not necessarily, quote unquote, fit into the mainstream, or exposure for people to different styles of art, right? And that's the kind of broader impact and outcome of what it is that we're
That's for a different day. Are there any questions? Shannon, do you want to come back to the conversation?
Yes, yeah, I did. Yeah, totally. I was actually going to say, Scott, I think I appreciate having artwork in a space or a co-working space, because the idea of creating conversation over something that isn't football would be nice. As someone who doesn't watch football at all, I think, and we're also avid painters. So my partner and I are pop art painters ourselves. So it's our release and relaxation. So, you know, a way that you can support, you know, people who are doing that for a living would be amazing. I think it's a fantastic idea. Wow. And I wonder, to get more creative, could you have performance art in spaces for short periods, you know, going through, I think that would be cool and interesting, a way to bring in more culture, to be, you know, make it the normal, you know. Yeah. I guess, yeah.
Shannon, I think that's a great suggestion, because as you know, a lot of artists, creators, I mean, comedians right now are struggling. I do think we need to, everyone, not just people on this webinar, to be conscious that if we want to enjoy art, we do have to kind of vote with our wallet, right? Like it's really the time to support artists, I think.
I very much agree. I think some of the chat we've tried some of that in the past, and I think it has been about that sort of time and era and when people are ready for it. Because I think the challenge is that with a lot of like, especially in the corporate spaces, it's even going in there to sort of say, hey, we can bring an artist in to talk about art, they're like, oh no, we've got to get back to work. You know, so it's been an interesting, like, we'd love to do it, but whether or not they'd be interested in supporting it. In the past, I would have said there's less appetite for it. I think now, following COVID, what I'm hoping is that we can actually get a bit more support for something like that. Because again, that it's taken us a while to get to this particular point, even to be able to, you know, say to people, hey, this is what we do, and for people to understand immediately. Like when we first started, it was very much, no, we had to give our clients exactly what they want. And that was part of our strategy, was that we started there, and then slowly we would like drip in work that they wouldn't have said yes. Right. So I think we can do some of those things. But as you said, it's about saying, you know, you're saying to people, you don't have to like all these performances. Be open-minded to that. Give it a go. You know, let us, you know, and if you don't get anything out of it, that's cool, because in 3 months' time, there might be another one that comes along. And that one, you might get something out of it. And that is the rich sort of human experience that I think we really should be encouraging.
Yeah, great conversation, Scott. And also just being able to say, hey, this is my subjective truth. I personally don't like it, but I don't have to be offended if you like it, or the other way around. And I think, as you know, today, it's just online just goes crazy with people being very vicious at attacking the other person's point of view and not listening. But I think art can be the common ground and say, okay, I think it's art, well, I like it for XYZ, and you don't like it for XYZ, and then you can agree to disagree. Well, I think that's awesome. Enough time. I think we got, that's great. The conversation. I love to catch up again in person, Scott, and then send invitation extends to you, Shannon. If you come to Footscray, just let us know. We have a coffee.
I look forward to it, honestly.
Yeah.
I actually wish I lived a bit closer, because you'd find me tinkering in your makerspace a lot more often, I think.
Thank you so much. Okay, so Scott and Shannon, one more time. If people want to get in touch with you, LinkedIn, what's the best way?
Yeah, totally. So LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach out to me. It's just Shannon Gilliland on LinkedIn. You'll find me. It's very, very simple. I'm happy to reach out. Like, just connect with me. It's totally fine. If you got any
likewise,
questions.
if you want to find anything about Colorspace, go to colorspace.gallery. I do have a website as well, scottco.com.au. So co with it, as you can see on the screen. But likewise on LinkedIn, I'm reasonably active there. So always feel free to just hit me up and have a chat. And all the content.
I think, Scott, you also do some lunchtime session streaming.
Yes, I do. I have a weekly show, which I missed this week because I was unfortunately preoccupied with a few other things. But I have a weekly LinkedIn Live, which are called Open Minds, which is not actually particular topic. It's topic agnostic. So it's not just about art. It's really about exploring at a deeper level, just different ideas, different perspectives, where there's everything from sales, our relationship to social media, our relationship to technology, all that type of stuff. And it's really a space for us to explore the conversation rather than here's 3 things that you need to do to perfect your next pitch.
And then, Scott, how do people find out more about that? Is it just how does that work?
Just find me on LinkedIn or look up #OpenMinds.
Okay, #OpenMinds. Yes. Yeah.
It'll go live on Tuesday to the public. So it's currently in its private phase, but if anyone's interested, we can sneak them in. It's fine.
Good timing.
Thanks so much to all of you. It really was a fascinating chat. I really appreciated it.
Go and tell us about,
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.